it's working. First of all, thank you all for being here on the last Friday of term, scarily. Tonight's guest is a really exciting one. Again, something slightly different for us all. His Serene Highness Prince Albert is the reigning monarch of the Principality of Monaco and head of the princely house of Grimaldi. Enthroned in 2005, he quickly became a leading advocate for environmental causes and has continued to do so through his foundation, which does incredibly effective and sterling work on a daily basis. He is also a keen sportsman, having competed in the bobsleigh in 5 successive Winter Olympics. If I could ask you all to be upstanding for His Serene Highness Prince Albert of Monaco.
Please. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, officers, members of the Cambridge Union, and ladies and gentlemen, dear students. Gosh, there's an awful lot of static here. I'm extremely pleased and honored to be able to speak to you today in this prestigious venue. The Cambridge Union is a debating arena like no other. By virtue of its ancient roots, the richness of its past, the importance and quality of the many public figures who have spoken here, this society has played and continues to play a unique role. Okay. Modern technology for you. Considering the personal honor that you are giving me today in your welcome here, I'd like to focus on a topic that must unite all of us, the preservation of our planet. This is indeed one of the most important and one of the most burning topics of our century, and it must ignite our hope, our commitment, and our willingness. It calls for all of our efforts, all of our attention, and our intelligence. Therefore, more than ever, it merits being honored by a society like yours. As I'm on the subject of history and of the past, I want to mention that a few days ago in Paris, I was part of the celebrations of the centenary of the end of the First World War, with scores of heads of state and government in the same city where we had met almost 3 years previously, almost to the day, to negotiate a major climate agreement, the COP15, the COP21 Paris Agreement. The coincidence of these two events, the same place, just a few years apart, is not without significance. The centenary of November 18th, 1918, took us back to the darkest hours of the 20th century, which was marked by sorrow, wars, and unspeakable tragedies that we hoped would never be repeated. On December 15th, on December of 2015, at COP21, we also hoped. We hoped to have the strength and courage to preserve this planet and its people from new tragedies. Because when we talk about the climate, biodiversity, pollution of different kinds, when we talk today about our planet, we are also talking about humans and their future. And we are talking about possible disasters that might strike tomorrow and the suffering that is already affecting many people now. We are talking about the dramatic fires that have just ravaged California, claiming, as you know, many lives, many homes were destroyed. We are talking about different storms, hurricanes, typhoons, and floods that month after month hit every continent and take their own share of victims. We are talking about droughts, polluted water, and polluted ecosystems that have become barren and are forcing thousands of our contemporaries on the roads to exile. We are talking about disasters 10 times worse that could happen tomorrow if we do not do everything we can and everything that must be done to try to prevent them. Of course, the battle that we must engage has nothing to do with war. Of course, we have no external power to battle with. But yet we do have an enemy perhaps more formidable than any external power. And that enemy is us. Today we must take action against ourselves to win what might be one of the most difficult battles in our collective history. It will be difficult because our daily comfort masks our failings on this planet as we deplete its resources and live on ecological credit. It will be difficult because this time there are no good guys and there are no bad guys. There are only ourselves to fight. It will be difficult because the battlefields for these unprecedented combats are everywhere. But first and foremost, they are within ourselves. They lie in our daily choices, in the most basic actions of our lives, and at a deeper level, in our view of the world. The enemy we must do battle with is this part of ourselves that is heir to millennia, during which Homo sapiens was a vulnerable primate. The part of ourselves that seeks to subjugate nature in the name of our own survival. The part of ourselves that still finds it hard to detach itself from its immediate interests, no matter how destructive they may be in the long term. To combat this, I know of no other recipe than to open our eyes. And opening our eyes in order to understand the real significance of the tragedies condensed for us by news channels. Realizing that those dying in a fire in California, those disappearing in floods or in typhoons in the Philippines, are people like us, exactly like us. People suddenly confronted by the consequences of a phenomena to which they too perhaps had paid little heed. Thinking of the children, relatives, and friends that they have left behind and how we will be regarded by them if we do nothing to prevent these tragedies from happening again. Opening our eyes means taking an interest in all the lives around our own. The lives of our children, of course, and of our grandchildren, for whom it is our duty to leave a viable world. And those of other species as well, upon whom, although we find it difficult to understand at times, we are profoundly dependent. Opening our eyes means caring about the tireless and vital work done by scientists, by these men and women without whom we would not understand why a few more degrees in the atmosphere can potentially change everything, without whom we would not even know that thousands of species are dying out as we speak. Opening our eyes means finally understanding that every one of our choices has serious consequences, that every journey, every purchase, every meal we make or we take has an impact on our planet, no matter how small or how minute it may be. A very real impact, especially when billions of us are performing the same tasks or the same actions. From this point of view, that the battlefields of this fight that we must engage in are not only philosophical, they are also economical. They involve our patterns of consumption, and as I said, but above all, our production patterns. They require us to stop dismissing the value of services rendered by nature. These ecosystemic services, as we refer to them, are estimated by the World Wildlife Fund at some $125 trillion a year, equivalent to 1.5 times global GDP. They play a vital role in our economies, but a role which, sadly, we find it difficult to recognize. Whether we are profiting from the soil, from the water, which is essential for so many of our business activities, or from the biodiversity without which our lives would be impossible, we should be capable of recognizing the true value of these common assets, of conserving them and of giving them their due importance. To give an example, do we think about the costs we would have to meet if pollinating insects were to disappear and we had to pollinate our crops by hand or with machines? It is unfortunately already happening in countries like China. Are we aware of the cost to us of farming in a worsened climate, subject to higher temperatures and also water shortages? Did we listen to the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, when it calculated a few years ago that the cost of adapting to climate change could reach $150 billion a year from 2025 to 2030, and between $250 and $500 billion in 2050. Conversely, the development of new production models that are more respectful of the environment and populations, more responsible and more sustainable, is now bringing extremely positive prospects. These production models, which are increasingly being developed, are based on short supply chains, a degree of restraint in the use of raw materials, the implementation of recycling based on an increasingly circular economy, and above all, the use of renewable energy. We know that these renewable energies, whether generated by the wind, by tides, sun, biomass, ground heat, the ocean and its chemistry, are at the heart of the green or blue economy that we must develop. These energies alone will allow us to really fight against climate change, while at the same time putting an end to the damage caused by mining and transportation of hydrocarbons. This change is something that everyone should benefit from. Users of nature, which of course I hope we all are, consumers, which we are as well, businesses also. We can already measure the benefits that businesses stand to gain from this. The benefits in terms of cost reductions, the use of recycled materials, which are often, of course, cheaper. Benefits in terms of safeguarding supplies, less dependent on the vagaries of world markets. Benefits in terms of innovation, the many improvements resulting from a sustainable approach that forces companies to rethink what they themselves are offering and to usefully reposition themselves. Benefits in terms of anticipation of regulatory constraints, which cannot fail to demand a growing respect for environmental issues from different economic stakeholders. And benefits above all in terms of image for companies that meet the increasingly clear expectations of their customers and their employees. This is the reason why it is essential for companies to join in this great battle to preserve our environment. Fighting each other achieves nothing. Altogether, we can change the ways we consume, feed ourselves, and travel. This is why we must all get involved in the measures that are necessary for the preservation of nature as a whole. One of the ways to do this that I'm thinking of in terms of protection of the marine environment is marine protected areas. Solutions that today are particularly effective in protecting specific areas in our seas and our oceans. Their principle may indeed be not to ban all economic activity there, but to promote sustainable activities performed within reasonable boundaries and in the interest of local populations and local ecosystems. I have for many years been committed to the development of these MPAs, which are gradually spreading around the world, although still too few and too far between, and being set up at a rate that is still unacceptably slow in view of what is necessary. And what was necessary was agreed upon at the World Convention on Biodiversity in Aichi, Japan in 2010, and that put at 10% the need of marine protected areas by the year 2020. Many scientists currently feel that 30% would be a more accurate number. However, by 2020, we will be still far from that 10%. I'm sorry that this common vision is proving so difficult to develop. I had another example of this a few days ago in Oceania, where I went as a part of a mission supported by my foundation, and I was able to witness there the unfortunate disconnect between local wishes to protect the sea in that and the ocean in that area, and in particular, of course, coral reefs, and the actual practices performed by some economic stakeholders. Whilst a great deal of effort is being made at a local level to promote the development of a blue economy, and whilst every extensive area are being given a protected status around Australia's Great Barrier Reef, local coal mining companies have managed to establish corridors to reach the different harbors along the coast. And they travel along this coast every day and to load their cargo. So we have reached an absurd situation where large sums of money are spent on the preservation, indeed, to try to impulse the regeneration of coral reefs, but where business activities with no future are still being carried out, despite their undeniable cost to the environment. So there must be better coordination between the philosophical battles that I was talking about and that we are engaging in, and the economic battles that must be fought. And this happens through a third type of battle, the political battle. I know that that's a particular interest to you, Mr. President. And they guide my action at a national level in the Principality of Monaco, where we are trying to implement policies in different areas with the objective of achieving carbon neutrality by the year 2050, with the development of the use of renewable energies and energy efficiency, or with forceful measures to combat plastic pollution. They also guide my actions at the international level, where Monaco has taken part for many years in different negotiations focusing on these topics, whether concerning climate change, biodiversity, the destiny of polar regions, or even the legal status of the high seas, which is currently, that negotiation is still currently underway at the UN. So I'm actually convinced that in the face of global threats, only multilateral negotiations, especially under the auspices of the United Nations, has the potential to enable us to find the right answers. And I'm pleased in this respect to see more and more states joining us, driven by public opinion and also by the evident gravity of the situation and of the risks that it is exposing itself to. Again, a few days ago, during the same trip that took me through the Asia-Pacific region, I had the opportunity to see the extent of the commitment of many of the region states to support an energy transition. And I'm thinking, for example, of the country of Vanuatu, where at the cost of significant effort, will achieve energy autonomy based solely on renewable energy by the year 2035. In discussions during the 5th Our Ocean Conference that was held in Bali, Indonesia, I witnessed a new mobilization around the future of our seas and our oceans. The success of this initiative, launched 4 years ago by the then the U.S. Secretary of State, Mr. John Kerry, testifies to the increasing consciousness of various stakeholders who are now aware of the pressing dangers that face us and who have all resolved to confront them. It also reflects a convergence of the three battles that I have spoken of: the philosophical, the economical, and the political battles, all of whom are extremely necessary in order to win this great fight, the fight of our century and the fight for our planet. Of course, it will be a long and difficult fight, and of course, it has already claimed victims, too many victims, and it will cost us sweat and tears, but we have no other choice than to engage it. And I know in this country in particular, which has always pledged its courage and its skills to some of humanity's greatest fights, that we can still win this. As Bertolt Brecht once wrote, a man who experienced more keenly than others the tragedies of the 20th century, those tragedies that we must now prevent from recurring in other forms. So he once said, "He who fights may lose, but he who does not fight has already lost." So we know where our duty lies, so I'm counting on each and every one of you to engage in this fight. I thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those remarks. I'm going to start by carrying on with what you were discussing in terms of the environmental issues. Then I'm going to steer it, if that's okay, to some other points which several members have raised. We had a form on the website, and thanks to everyone who submitted those questions. They're really, really helpful. So, obviously, environment is a real passion of yours, and it's something which Monaco's doing a lot of incredibly good work to drive forward on the global stage. Do you remember the moment where you decided that this was going to be a key focus of yours? Was there a specific moment, or was it more of a long-term thing?
Well, obviously, throughout my childhood and my teens and student years, I was aware of different issues, and also from family legacy, because my great-great-grandfather, Prince Albert I, started the Oceanographic Museum in Monaco. He started the Oceanographic Institute in Paris. So he was, although not scientifically trained, he was very, very curious in the right sense of being curious about, and he had a very curious mind on different sciences and on different, also on different political issues of his time. He also was very vocal at the time of the Dreyfus affair in France. He also was a great promoter of peace, and he, in an attempt with other statesmen and all that, tried to. This is a very little known fact, but it's in his memoirs. He did try to speak to Kaiser Wilhelm in 1914 to try to dissuade him from escalating into what could have been, in his mind, what could end up being a tragic and dramatic situation, which, of course, unfortunately, it did develop into. So he was an incredible visionary man. So his work inspired me, of course, but my father also had spearheaded different programs for the Mediterranean, especially the protection of marine mammals, the protection of different coastal areas. So I was very well versed and very informed of these issues, and I accompanied my father on different different visits dealing with these issues, and more significantly, at the Earth Summit in 1992 in Rio, where that was also an occasion that opened my eyes and mind to the what you could sense that something unfortunately very big was happening and was about to happen and was about to be an issue that we all had to confront someday. And so I think it's all these things, but of course, when I succeeded my father, then that became more evident to me, and several years before that I said, well, I think this is going to be key to our survival and to the survival of the generations that will follow us. And so I really wanted to be more engaged and do something more personal. And so that's why after I did a very, an extremely inspiring trip to the North Pole and to the Arctic region in the spring of 2006, then I decided to create my foundation. And so almost 13 years later and some 430 projects later, the foundation has, I think, been successful in trying to address different urgencies and with partners, of course. We never do participate in these programs alone. But I think it was my little contribution to what I sensed was a very urgent situation.
Yeah, and obviously you discussed the importance of, within Monaco, working for carbon neutrality, as well as on a global stage. What would you say is the #1 sort of program priority for the foundation at this moment in time? Or is it just multiple all coming together?
Well, of course, we try to respond to different urgencies or different programs that are aligned with our priorities. And of course, our priorities are the Mediterranean region, our developing countries, our both polar regions, and so those are the main areas where we operate. But we've participated in projects in over 60, close to 70 countries on all 5 continents. But so I think the issue of preservation of our oceans has been a very big part of what we do, both in terms of biodiversity, but in terms also of setting up different, or helping to set up different marine protected areas around the world, but also fight against plastic pollution. That is a huge issue. But I think that the overriding urgency is, of course, to try to mitigate the consequences of climate change, but also to try to work on putting less, not only carbon dioxide, but other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. I don't think, and if you listen to the scientists, that window is closing rapidly on us, because we don't know exactly how we know how to limit, but we don't know if it's going to be possible within the time frame of a few years. But we have to stop pumping gigatons of CO2 into the atmosphere. That's basically, I mean, it sounds easy, and it's extremely difficult, and we know that, and unfortunately, we're not all on the same page, all of our countries, on this issue, but that's what we have to try to fight for.
Thank you. This is a question which has been submitted by Eleanor. So Eleanor, if you're out there or watching, this is for you. And I suppose this is a little bit of an inflection point in the interview. So it's going to take us from discussing the environment to other aspects of the country. So Eleanor asks, what gets your heart going more? The thrill of taking part in the Olympics or your achievements when it comes to the environment? I know they're very different things.
Being in this room right now.
Okay.
No, well, I think it's all, these were important, that was important at a certain time in my life. It was I took my competing at that level in a difficult sport. They're all difficult sports if you practice them at a certain level. But that was a challenge. I took it as a huge challenge for me personally, physically and mentally, and in terms of preparation. And it's a team sport, but it's also very much an individual sport when you're the driver. And so you try to. What I learned from that experience is useful for me now as well. And this challenge of trying to preserve our environment for future generations is a formidable challenge. And it's one that takes up a lot of my time. But I know that is essential for our survival and the survival of those that will follow us on this planet. I don't think people realize that many people are. Sorry, I should have said that many people are starting to realize this more and more. But we have to bring these issues up on the international agenda more than it's being done right now. And so, I think there are different moments in life that are important for you. I had a wonderful life also as a student in the United States. I unfortunately didn't go to Cambridge. I did come here before I was a student in the States, but at a language school. But so I think it all, the lessons that you learn at different moments of your life will inevitably be useful to you at a moment in time. And so everything that I did up until I really started to get more engaged in these environmental issues are serving the purpose to try to galvanize and to mobilize as many people around these issues as possible.
Thank you. Sort of tying all that together, and I've got two last questions, then we'll go to the floor. So get ready for that, audience.
Be kind to me, please.
Obviously, Monaco's famous for many things. It's famous for the film festival. It's also famous for the Grand Prix, which I know lots of us enjoy. How do you see that changing over the next few years? I know Formula One's trying very hard to work on environmental issues as well. Yep. I was just wondering how you think that's going to play out in such an iconic race, in such an iconic place.
Absolutely. But I think both the FIA, the International Automobile Federation, and F1 are trying to be more responsible in terms of the environment as a whole, but in terms also of producing cars that are competitive, challenging, but that have that element of can't say eco-friendly, but being that are less that consume less, but also that save energy and that rekindle energy. The car system is an example of that. So they are thinking more in terms of energy reduction and renewable energy. And of course, the EPRI, the electric
Yeah.
single-seater championship is an evidence of that. And it is a growing series. It is a vastly competitive series now, and it has brought clean mobility, if you want to call it, in a racing form in the heart of different big cities in the world, because that's all the tracks for the E-Prix, for the Formula E, are in different city centers. We have had 2 E-Prix races in Monaco since the start of the series. We cannot do it every year due to logistical constraints, but we will be hosting a Formula E Prix the next May, 2 weeks before the F1 Grand Prix. And so I think we're still years away from that, but I think there might be at some point a merging of Formula E or a blend of Formula E and F1 probably in a hybrid form, because that's where the future lies, I think. And it'll be a great example and a great way also to test new technological advances for the automobile industry with these series.
Perfect. And just one very quick one before we go. I don't know how many of us here have had the pleasure of going to Monaco and visiting. I have, but if I was going tomorrow to Monaco, and I was to if I had to do just one thing, what would you recommend doing? Or what would be your...
I won't say the casino. No. Actually, what I encourage people to do when they come to Monaco is the iconic venues and places are hard to miss, but you have to take the time to, go in the back streets and discover the Monaco that most tourists that or day tourists that don't have much time don't get to see, and that's where you discover the real people and the real nature and the real soul of Monaco. And it is a place where there are a lot of hardworking people, where there are a lot of different people from different walks of life. We're home to 130 different nationalities that comprise our resident population. We have a population of 38,000. And we're just a little over 2 square kilometers. So 130 nationalities on that small space. I think that seemed to be getting along quite well. We haven't had any incidents. So I think that's pretty remarkable in itself. And to see that it feels like a village at times, but a very cosmopolitan place at the same time. And so I would say, take the time to discover the back streets. I can't say the dark alleys, but at least to go beyond the traditional iconic places.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And thank you for the advice, especially. It's really appreciated. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to open the floor to questions. So if you could put your hand up and wait for a steward to get to you with a microphone. I'm going to kick off just at the front here, if that's okay.
Testing, 1, 2.
Hello, microphone? Yeah, just project, it's fine.
Well, thank you very much for being here tonight, and thank you for talking the data. And data says that everything in this world is self-relevant. So every action that we do as a person is self-relevant. So my latest research was on the high-tech technologies, in particular electric cars, and what needs to be done and how the consumer can be persuaded to purchase an electric car. And during that research, I found that already a few years ago, in comparison, for instance, China and the United States, China were way more further in eco-friendly thinking than America. As well, Chinese consumers are willing to pay more for the product if there is an eco label to that. The same actually goes to India. People in India are more eco-friendly. So, and here is the question. How come the countries who are stereotypically not as educated as Europe and the States, they don't have as much money into the eco-learning programs? You just mentioned the money that European Union and all the other organizations are putting into the eco-learning. We still do not find a self-relevant to be eco-friendly and to think eco, and actually even to buy an electric car. So what needs to be changed in our smart world in Cambridge and the world itself to be self-relevant, eco-friendly? Thank you.
Okay, how much time do we have? Okay. I think the answer is probably multi-layered, but what I see is that in the countries that you mentioned, China and India, the pollution issues are so severe that they have obviously become a public health issue as well. And so I think that there was more incentive, aside from price and you know, trying to bring it to a right price, but as you said, they're willing to pay more because they've touched upon the dangers for their own health and that of their families and their loved ones, and so they feel compelled to do something personally, and an electric or other renewable energy, because I know they're working not only in China and India, but many countries are also working on other types of energy, and hydrogen is an option as well. So I think that unless, unfortunately, I hope we don't have to get to that point in our countries where the air quality is such that we have to, that there'll be huge public health issues, that we will be forced to, or that people will feel forced to change their ways. We have to start doing that before then. We've been offering in Monaco for many years now different incentives, cash incentives for people to purchase either electric or also hybrid vehicles. And that has worked quite well, up to 30% of the price of the vehicle. And so now we have a fleet of over 1,000, close to 1,500, I think, vehicles, electric or hybrid. That might not seem much, but for the population of 38,000, it's not too bad. And but of course we have to continue. Well, we have to try to give a good example that others might be able to follow. But so it is possible, but you really have to put have to make it more attractive, and more more reachable for and affordable for different people in our developed countries.
Perfect. Should I go for popular? I'm going to go right down here.
Because you look there and then you...
I know. Perfect. Is there... Yeah, it's always a worrying one. I'm never quite sure.
Well, thank you for coming. I have two questions. First one is, you mentioned fighting on 3 battlefields. I want to know on which one do you feel like you're making the biggest impact and why? And the second question is, second to last, are we going to see a spectacular comeback before the end of the season, or is Monaco going to go on the 2nd division?
Okay. I think, unfortunately, people are usually very pragmatic, and unless we, going back to your question, unless it makes economic sense, people aren't going to look at the philosophical or the political battle first. So it's going to have to make these changes that we're talking about for energy, for transportation, for waste management, for a whole range of issues, for plastic pollution. If you, there's a great move now, and I think it's the issue is very much in the. Excuse me. I think that issue has been in the press and in the media now for some time, and in a very effective way. And I think people have grasped the enormity of this. But there is a move now toward, putting a value to plastic and making it an integral part of a circular economy concept. And that will make a huge difference. So if we do that, if we can do that for plastics, we can do that for other things. So it has to make, unfortunately, in our societies, it has to make business and economical sense before the other elements come into play. And to address your question about the Monaco football team, I hope that we will get out of the present hole that we dug ourselves into, and that we will be able to avoid relegation. But it's a very difficult season, lots of injuries, lots of, unfortunately, problems with the owners of the club. So we are hoping and praying, and we're playing a game tonight, I think. So no, I'm sorry, tomorrow night. So I have to, not in Monaco, but away. So we are praying for better days. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm going to go down here, if that's okay. Yeah. Yes, I think there's a... Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rudy Sharma. I am a graduate student in the physics department. Thank you very much for your talk. That was amazing. I appreciate the focus towards environment. I work on a subsect of physics that's directly aiming towards climate change. But a lot of times what we have to do as physicists is attack the problem via the fundamentals. But in science, a lot of times that kind of research is underfunded. And instead, the funding goes towards technological or engineering industrial solutions, and we never get to fully attack the problem. So, Your Highness, how do you feel about funding the fundamentals of science?
Well, we don't usually do that. With the foundation, you mean? We haven't really done that yet. We funded different research projects, but more in the concerning more the biodiversity side of things, but we can certainly look at that, and we should talk more afterwards, maybe. But that could be also. But I understand that part, that fundamental research is underfunded. It's underfunded in many countries, and in France as well. So I think it is extremely important that part of research be funded in the proper way. Okay.
Perfect. We'll go back onto this side. So I'm going to go at the very back there, the very, very back.
I enjoyed your talk a lot. I was just wondering, in Monaco, I know there's a development happening near the tunnel and the land extension there, and I was just wondering, with your interest in oceanography, how you were going to address the issues that might come about with that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That the land extension project, so it is in an area, yes, roughly a little before the entrance of the tunnel there in the Portier section of Monaco, and will go past the Grimaldi Forum on the east. It's a 6-hectare project. The concept at the beginning, when the project was in the design phase, was of course to make it as flagship as possible in terms of environmental impact, and so the guidelines were very strict. And that started with the removal of to clear the floor bed, the seabed for the base of that they had to do a rock base so that the pillars could come and fit on that. So that we had to clear one by one these large batches of Posidonia algae, which is not only a very important algae and for the Mediterranean, but it in terms of harboring different species, but it also we know that it also helps absorb CO2, and so that was these batches were relocated a little further away in a marine reserve, and we removed other species as well. So this was done very, very carefully. It's also the work was stopped several times during the summer because the sediments in the water were too high. The turbidity of the water had reached different levels. They're different categories, but threshold levels, and so that was very clear in the guidelines that they had to stop work if these limits were passed. So I think it's done. I mean, I can go on and give you other details, but basically we are monitoring this, and there's a scientific committee that approved the guidelines and that is monitoring the progress of the offshore work being done.
Fantastic. I'll go back onto this side, and I'll take one from just down there. Yeah, if you just wait. Thank you.
Just wanted first to clarify the very first question. To what extent you can say now that to what extent Monaco is green, to what extent it is independent from fossil fuel right now as a very wealthy country? And second, is your foundation considering something related to utilization of all the green green, so-called green energy equipment, like batteries, all the transducers, all the electric equipment that might need to be utilized in 5 years' time and 10 years' time, and which will be way more poisonous than fossil fuels. Thank you.
Okay, we're not completely free of fossil fuels, of course. That's going to take quite some time, but we are on track for reaching not talking about carbon neutrality, but that's our ultimate goal, but a significant reduction by the year 2030, so 50% by the year 2030. We are almost at 21% reductions now. We still have to work a lot on not quite transportation, although that's the big effort is being done on public transportation, but also on buildings that are energy efficient, and that's a sizable portion of it. And there are different ways in which we're going to do this, but basically we are on track, and everybody we produced this paper that was launched by the government, and it's called the Energy Transition Pact, and that was signed by not only individuals but different businesses in Monaco, and so the whole community is engaged in an energy transition scheme. So they pledged to reduce whatever targets that they that they've been able to adhere to, and that's really been very, very positive. So I think 96% of all businesses in Monaco have signed this Energy Transition Pact. So that's very encouraging. I'm not quite sure about the second part of your question on the.
Your investments in utilization of all the green equipment.
Well, we have already begun that. That's of course it has to be spread out on a longer period. But whenever there are new equipments, be it in transportation, be it in different areas, we look into it, and we see if that can make a significant difference within our scheme. So we are very, we did that for public transportation, for different buses that are, and there are some electrical buses now. Fortunately, we have a topography that's very hilly, and so I was in an electric bus in Hamburg, Germany, where they've been doing different tests now for over a year, but they have very flat terrain there, and so it's easier to have a fleet of electric buses there. So we are working. We have hybrid buses with different types of biofuels, but we will be looking at electric buses once they have the autonomy and once they adapt to our topography.
Perfect. I think we only have time for one more question, so this is always the toughest moment of the evening. I'm going. Can I pass it on to you?
Well, I think there are two gentlemen there that have been raising their hands for so I don't know which one. President, you have to help me.
I know. I'm going to go for the one nearest me. Sorry. I'm really sorry. So, yeah. No, sorry. Yeah. No, that's there. Sorry.
Okay. Yes.
Oh, sorry, no, you. So, yeah, you, sorry.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you so much for your talk. We've got quite a popular system in Europe. We have a lot of monarchies. We have 10 which are constitutionally constrained, and we have that most peculiar thing, an elective absolute monarchy in the Vatican. I wonder if you see any tension between having monarchies and having political influence and power by ancient hereditary right in Europe, which is so famed, and we promote the message across the world of being meritocratic and also democratic. So I wonder if you could comment on a tension there.
Wow. Well, you know, it's a constitutional monarchy in Monaco, so we do have obviously a government, and we do have an elected body, a parliament. We also have the particularity is that there's also a mayor of Monaco and a city council. So there are different ways of course, of expressing views in a democratic form. What everybody has said is that they in Monaco at least is that they respect the present not only constitution but the present institutions. So I think no matter what the mode of government is, what is important is to have stability and to be able to, and of course in my position, the great advantage is that I can afford to have a long-term vision. I'm not, of course there are checks and balances, but they not being submitted to elections, you can afford to have a more long-term vision and to try to implement these, some of the different things that I was talking about. That's an incredible advantage. And you can get the best advice and get the best people around you, but if you, and they have to serve that long-term vision and serve, of course, the general interest. That's always been paramount for me.
Well, with that, very sadly, we're going to have to finish. I know lots of you had loads of questions, which is great. So it's always nice to end with lots of interest still in the room, I suppose. The only thing I really have to say before we finish is that when I say so, I'm going to ask you all to stand and stay in your places whilst we exit, because that would be really useful just in terms of managing the transition onto our next event, which starts at 7:30, which is a panel event on women and terrorism, which should be quite interesting. Hopefully something a little bit different there. But as I said, the most important thing I can do at this stage is to thank His Serene Highness for coming to Cambridge and for delivering those remarks. It really, really was appreciated. And if we could all thank His Serene Highness in the customary way by standing and applauding as he exits. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.